You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Looking forward to today's Friday review. As always, happy to bring you some of the things that I found interesting over the past week, or kind of what I've been thinking about. These Friday reviews allow me to look at what people are talking about online, what people are asking questions about, what people want to know more about in the realms of wellness, weight loss, and anti-aging. But I think also we try to take that one step further in the Cabral Concept and not just give you the kind of mundane or what's already been spoken about in terms of like wellness and weight loss and anti-aging, meaning that if the hot topic of the day for wellness is looking at inflammation, or it's looking at going low carb, or it's looking at putting fat in your coffee, or any of these things, we're going to explain to you if that's good for you or bad for you and why. And then we're most likely going to also say, well, if it's good for you, then who does that mean it's good for? Does that mean it's good for the entire world? And if so, how is that even possible? And if it's only good for a certain subsection of people, then we'll talk about who those people would be best for as well. And so this is a very different thing. This is a very different concept, this thing called bioindividuality. And that's what my practice is all about. And it's what I try to preach. It's not the common dialect of the day, meaning that we try to fit people in these nice little boxes, these nice little systems that we try to help the greatest amount of people within these parameters. But the problem is, people fall through the cracks. I fell through the cracks. And since I fell through the cracks, I had to learn the hard way. And now my job as a naturopathic doctor is truly to teach. It's not always to work with people one-on-one. It's to try to teach methodologies so that other practitioners and other people can learn for themselves. They can then get the results they want. And whether they're a practitioner or not, they can share that information then with others. But how did I learn all of this? That's the question I get from other doctors, other naturopathic doctors, chiropractors, a lot of functional medicine coaches in the industry, nutritionists. They're asking me, how did you learn this since it's not taught in school? And so it's a great question. And the truth is that I never set out to learn any of this. I think like a lot of people in this health field, I stumbled upon it. I guess that's the best way to say, like, I didn't know what to study or what to look for because there was no guideline. There was no path for me to walk down, because if there was, I would have walked down it. I would have done anything 20 plus years ago to get well. Anything at all. You could have literally told me to just stay in bed for a week and that will get you better. You could have told me to take this drug. You could have told me to take that, and I would have done it because I was desperate. But none of it worked. The drugs didn't work, the sleeping, the taking a month off or more from school and high school my senior year, all of those things, none of it worked. They just didn't work. And then I would say, okay, well, later I found some health practitioners, some, alternative medicine practitioners, whatever you'd like to call it. And I went to them and they gave me certain herbs and they put me on certain nutrition plans, and it worked. A lot of it worked for a little bit. Like, it didn't stick, or I got some results, but I didn't get completely better. And I went on like this for about 10 years, not quite 10 years, but pretty close to it. And then I met my mentor, I call my final mentor, but of course I've had many mentors along the way. And, I read a couple hundred books a year, and every book that I read, that person is like a virtual mentor to me. I get to read their knowledge. I get to soak it up. I get to absorb it, and then I get to not just go all in for what they said, but then use that and make it what's applicable with all the other knowledge that I've consumed. And that's life, right? The reason why it's tough to go to a 25-year-old doctor and get all the results you want is simply about life experience, and that's why I think it's a good thing. You don't really get to become a doctor until your later 20s or early 30s. And that's because you need to go to graduate school, you need to do a residency, you need to get get some experience. You need to work under another doctor. And that's like, you need that life experience. And so for me, since I didn't even get to go back to school until I was, I think, 27 years old, I got a lot of life experience till then. And then I met my final mentor when I was somewhere around 25, 26, 27 years old. Her name was Margaret Smith Pete. Again, I've had a lot of great doctors before that, but Dr. Pete was the one who truly introduced me to Ayurvedic medicine. Now, keep in mind, I had studied Ayurvedic medicine for about 2 years before I met with Dr. Pete. I would say, yeah, about 2 years. And I read her book, and her book's called My Doctor Says I'm Fine, So Why Do I Feel So Bad? And like the title of that book, it's an obscure book. Like it's just not a well-known book, but it spoke to me. And I was reading a lot of Ayurvedic medicine. And I'm going to give you some of those books today. But what I want to teach you though is that I learned the philosophy of Ayurveda. And a lot of people think it's just a system of medicine. It's not. So if you're asking me, why do I practice differently? And how do I practice differently? And how do I get results that are uncommon? I mean, I get referred by a lot of doctors, a lot of their patients that they're not able to get great results with. And I don't feel any ego involved. I feel grateful. I feel blessed. I'm extremely happy to do the work that I do. It's not easy work, but I'm grateful. I'm very, very happy that I'm able to do this work. And again, it's not my work. What am I doing? I'm carrying on the message of a philosophy that's many thousand-year old, and it's called Ayurveda. And Ayurveda is called the science of life. That's what it translates to. Ayur, or Ayu, and Veda, the science of life, or the truth of life. And it's truly the truth of life. The medical part of Ayurveda is only one of the 8 branches. You have to keep in mind that Ayurvedic medicine is part of an overall philosophy of life. And when you understand that philosophy of life, I'm telling you right now, things begin to change in your life. Because when I work with someone, one of the reasons why I'm able to get people results when they've never gotten results in the past is, yes, I'm able to run state-of-the-art functional medicine lab tests. And you can run that yourself. You can literally just go online to my website. You can go to the store. You can peruse the different labs we offer. You're going to get my review, and then you're going to get a health coaching call that comes along with it. And that's great. Like, that is great. But you're not going to just get the results from that lab. Anybody can do that. You can run a lab anywhere. What you're going to get is a philosophy that comes along with it. Is an understanding by listening to these podcasts. You need to listen to the podcast. The information's free. I will always give away my information for free. That's the goal. The labs aren't free. They're not free to me. They cost money. So that's why we have to do that. But the information is what's more important than anything else. You have to keep in mind, it's the information. It's the philosophy. And in Ayurvedic medicine, which keep in mind, traditional Chinese medicine, Greek, Roman, functional medicine, even conventional medicine, all of it came from Ayurvedic medicine. What we've lost along the way is the understanding and philosophy that life is all about balance. The only reason you're sick right now, the only reason why you don't have peak energy, you're not living the life of your dreams, you might be a little overweight, or you're aging in a way that is not appropriate, meaning like you're breaking down faster than you're building up, is simply because you've lost balance. And that's what Ayurveda teaches. There's no mystery. Ayurveda is not a simple subject to study. But I believe that if you make it just a part of your overall journey and lifestyle and you want to learn a little bit more about it, you don't need to dive in. You can start to just absorb a little bit about it. My podcast, in a strange way, is all Ayurveda. It is all philosophy. People ask me, like, why as a naturopathic doctor do you do Mindset and Motivation Mondays? What does that possibly have to do with getting well? Well, the truth is this. Any doctor that does not concern themselves with the mindset of their patient is missing an entire facet to that person getting well. In my practice, if I were to work with people specifically and never address the stress in their life, the emotional issues, the work stress, the family, the relationships, where they're at in their life, I'm missing an enormous part of that person. And if I don't work with that person in order to heal their entire body, that's what we call it holistic, not HOLISTC. We're looking at holistic, WHOLIST. It's hard to spell while you're doing a podcast at the same time. And if I don't look at that, if I don't understand the whole person, I can't possibly help them get well. Because whether they have gut issues, electrolyte issues, mineral-based issues, vitamin deficiencies, toxicities, any one of these number of things that can go wrong within the systems of the body. If I don't understand that, plus who they are and where they're at in their life right now, I can't truly help them get well. And so what Ayurveda teaches is the entire life. It's looking at the whole person from a true integrative perspective, not just talking about hormones. That's not truly integrative. Not using niacin for depression or high cholesterol. That's not being an integrative practitioner, or even yourself. What we need to look at is this. We find the imbalance. I want to teach you just a little bit about Ayurveda today, and then I want to give you on my Friday reviews just some knowledge, some books, some continuing education that you can look towards or forward to if you want to learn more about this. But of course, I will teach more and more on the Cabral concept, and eventually I will go in depth with body types. It's just not going to be a simple one podcast solution to that. And that's, again, because I don't want anybody to listen to a single episode of the Cabral concept. If you drop in for an episode here or there, then fantastic. That's going to help. But if you believe that health is part of your journey in life, whether you ever decide to become a health coach or whether you are a health coach, or you just want this knowledge to be able to pass it on to your children so that once and for all, these shenanigans that we call medicine right now, which is really just sick care, it has to come to an end. Eventually, it has to end with us. At some point in everyone's life, in every family, there has to be a person who decides to step up and say, I'm not okay with going along with injecting everything into myself, injecting everything into my family, consuming this processed food, taking these drugs, masking these symptoms, and not ever looking at the underlying root causes. And yes, some conventional medicine is great. Some of it is life-saving. We're lucky to have it. But we can't go all in blindly and just say, okay, well, I have acid reflux. I'm just going to take Prilosec, or I'm going to take Zantac, or I'm going to take this proton pump inhibitor, or this whatever. You can't. You just can't do that. Maybe use it temporarily, but don't you want to find out why that acid reflux is there in the first place? I think that's really important. And so what Ayurveda would look at is something like acid reflux. Let's give you a few examples. And they would say, acid reflux would be specifically a pitta-based disorder. That is something to do with inflammation, heat. We're going to look at that. We're going to say, why is that an issue? And then in the brilliance of Ayurveda, right, in the brilliance of every other form of Eastern medicine, we're going to say, well, if pitta is heat, if pitta is acid, we need alkaline, we need cooling. And now we know we would use cooling-based herbs and teas, such as aloe vera, such as even just a teaspoon of baking soda in water. Or we would use something like a coolant, like a peppermint tea. So when you understand that there are cooling herbs and there are heating herbs, and everything like that with foods as well, then you can start to see how it's actually not that difficult to balance an imbalanced body. Of course, the whole time, we do want to ask, why is that acid reflux coming in the first place? Because maybe it is H. pylori, and we can test for that. Or maybe it is poor food combining. Or maybe it is many, many different issues, food sensitivities, or maybe it is stress. Again, we can test for that, we can figure it out. But isn't it great to be able to use state-of-the-art lab testing, but then combine that with tried and true 6,000 plus year old natural health, natural remedies that actually work? And again, if someone's feeling lethargic, they're feeling sluggish, this would be a kapha-based disorder. So what does a kapha-based disorder need? Well, it needs the opposite of what kapha is, which is the earth and the water, as we call it, or the dampness and the heaviness. So then we would need things that are more vata. And I know this might not make sense to you now, but I'm trying to show you how it is balanced. Vata is light. That's the opposite of heavy, right? And what do we need that isn't damp? We need dry. Vata or ectomorph is the opposite of endomorph. We know that. We know that in both conventional medicine and we know it in Ayurvedic medicine. So for the kapha, what would we want to do? Well, we would probably want to do things more like dry heat, dry saunas. We would want to do more exercise to move the body more vata-based movements. So what I'm saying to you is that if you know what your imbalance is, you can do the opposite. And believe it or not, the opposite starts to balance what you have too much of because you're lacking something. We need to add more of what you're lacking, and we need to take away some of what you have too much of. And that's literally my entire practice. Now, of course, that's maybe a little basic, but I essentially tell people, all I need to do is find out what your toxicities are, what you have too much of. okay? And then I need to find out what your deficiencies are. And I replace those. I add more to it. And by doing that, I'm following the time-tested Ayurveda methodologies, and I'm using state-of-the-art functional medicine or naturopathic medicine to find out what those are. So I'm using the ancient modalities with the best of state-of-the-art. I don't believe that there's a better way to do it than that. I really don't. And if you're looking at, well, what is naturopathic medicine, which is functional medicine, we're really just I think the best way to say this is that we're just looking to use the best of everything. And as my mentor, Dr. Pete told me, she believes that if the ancient sages from Ayurvedic times were around today, the ones who wrote these great volumes, these great books, they would be using functional medicine lab testing today, because they would still use the same foods and herbs and those types of things, but they would also then have pinpoint diagnosis. Now, do keep in mind, in Ayurvedic times, there are actually ways of testing people. And again, I did this when I was in India and Sri Lanka. We use the pulse. We use the face. We use the entire body. We looked at everything. And then there's also urine-based tests. There's a lot of different tests. They're not archaic. They're not at all. They're actually beautiful in their simplicity and how pinpoint they are. But I'm not going to get into those today. What I want to let you know is this, that Ayurveda is the truth. It literally translates to the truth of life. If you are stuck, it's always because of an imbalance. And the imbalance always means that you have too much of something. And you have too much of something because you're deficient in something as well. When you look at the yin and the yang of Chinese medicine, or the Tao, what you're looking at is you are literally looking at a balance between light and dark, heavy and light. You're looking at an imbalance, or you're looking at a balance between the dampness and the dryness, like everything in the body. And Ayurveda is the same exact way. So do keep in mind that in every major philosophy of life, because it is about philosophy as well, and every major form of medicine, it was always known that the only reason we get sick in both body and mind and spirit is because we've become unbalanced. And so I plan to share more of this in the future with you. If you like this podcast, please let me know. Please let me know you want more of this information you can either write in at support@drcabraldetox.com or support@stephencabral.com. Join our Facebook group, which I would love to connect with you. Just go to cabralsupportgroup.com. Would love to connect. Or if you ever have a question, you can always write me if you'd like it answered on the weekend host calls at stephencabral.com/Ask Cabral. Now, before I go today, I just want to share with you a couple books because people might want to get more into this whole thing, like what is Ayurveda? I do want to let you know that is not a simple system of medicine, and it's going to be written in a little bit different of a philosophy than you're used to. So if you don't keep an open mind, it's difficult to grasp and get into. But if you're willing to keep an open mind and you're willing to look at things from a different perspective, knowing that your knowledge will not transform in the next week, month, or year, but if you stick with it, you start to let it kind of roll around in your head, the results can honestly be life-changing. And if you're a practitioner or you're somebody who's thinking about getting into health coaching, the edge up that you will have over other people in your field will just literally be phenomenal and very, very glaringly noticeable. Because the way that you try to solve problems will just be very different. Because you'll be looking at literally the whole person, not just lip service wise, but you will literally be looking at their entire being, knowing what their genotype is, which is called a prakriti, and knowing what their vikruti is as well, which is where they're at today. And both need to be balanced. So there's so many great books. Honestly, there's so many great books. Dr. Svoboda is one of my favorite. Dr. David Frowley is one of my favorite. You can look up their books. You can look up Dr. Vasant Lad, who was really one of the foremost Ayurvedic authorities in the United States, came over from India. He is the direct person who was my mentor's teacher. So I'm basically, I don't even know like the right way to say it, but essentially like second in line after Vasant Lad, meaning like Vasant was my mentor's direct mentor. Not only was he or she one of his top students, she actually wrote his textbooks. Like that's how high level she is. And just, again, like how does that happen? Like how do I as this sick kid who can't figure it out, but's reading. By the time I met my mentor, I'd already read 1,000 books. Like, how do I just bump into her? Is it chance? Is it luck? What is it? Well, I'd like to say I put myself in the position. I read a couple hundred books a year. Eventually, I read her book. I just felt, for whatever reason, like I needed to connect with her, which I had never done before. I emailed her. I couldn't even find her email address. I emailed her. By chance, she said, I can't believe you emailed me. I can't believe, you found my book, all of these things. I said, I'd really like to work with you. I'm happy to pay you. Please let me know how I can get your knowledge. I took a bus to Maine, like 3-hour trip to Maine on a bus to meet with her. I took a bus back, another 3-hour bus ride that same day. So who knows? Who knows? Was it a chance occurrence? Was it coincidence? Was it meant to be? I don't know. But what I can tell you now is I met the person who literally wrote the textbooks, who doesn't even get the credit for it. Her name's in the footnotes, but who wrote the books for Vasant Lad, who was the foremost authority in the United States on Ayurveda, who came and learned in India. So anyway, I don't know. I'm just really happy to be in this position now to share this with you. So the textbooks are called Volume 1 and Volume 2. It's Textbook of Ayurveda, and Volume 1 is called Fundamental Principles by Vasant Lad. And Volume 2 is called Textbook of Ayurveda, A Complete Guide to Clinical Assessment. And so essentially what my mentor did, Dr. Pete, was she was the student of Vasant Lad who got all of his recorded lectures. She studied, got her degree under him. And then she translated all of his lectures into 2 textbooks. And the textbooks are very, very approachable. They're really not that bad. They're about 300 pages each, and they're amazing. And so if you're looking to really get into it, I can't recommend them enough. I will, of course, will link these up in the show notes. Simply go to stephencabral.com/podcast, always for all previous podcasts. And I believe today's show is if you go to stephencabral.com/616. I hope that's the name of today's podcast, but you will find out just so that's today's show. And again, if you're not ready to start getting textbook wise into it, you can simply look up Ayurveda online. You'll get different summaries of it. Just make sure you're obviously reading from an authority on it. But you can also read, there's a fun little book, and I kind of went back and forth. Should I share this one with you? Should I not? Because you can't skim Ayurveda. It just makes no sense. You can't grasp it. But there's a nice little book that if you want to just kind of dig into it, just kind of get a feel for it. It's by a whole brand or company called Teach Yourself. I had never heard of this company before, but I have their book, and I remember reading this. I actually remember reading this in Portland, Maine, so many years ago, more than a decade ago. And it's called just Teach Yourself Ayurveda. And if it's still available in print, I'm going to link this up on the show notes today. So stephencabral.com/616. And if you have any questions, I want you to know I'm happy to answer them on the weekend host calls. But I also want to let you know that I believe more people need to know about Ayurveda. Just know that the Cabral concept, when you listen to my words, when you listen to podcasts, they are deeply entrenched in the philosophies of Ayurveda. I might not state it that way, but do know that that is the place where I'm coming from for the most part. Of course, I've studied state-of-the-art work and all of that, but the overall philosophy of balance comes from that. And the last part I'll say is this, is that when you're looking at a form of medicine in general, and as much as I love Ayurveda as well, what I want you to understand is that the truth lies in everything. Meaning that there are parts of conventional medicine you should use. There are parts of Ayurveda you should use. There are lab tests you should use. There are parts of a blood type diet that you should use. There are parts of going more towards a lower carb that you should use. There are parts. So keep in mind, by reading Ayurveda, you understand that this is the actual truth. Eventually, you get so deep into it that you understand that there's a place for everything essentially in this world, and that there is no all for one. It's about, and I'll end with this right now, it's about replacing your deficiencies and removing a lot of your toxicities. What's overgrown, what's imbalanced is removing some of those things. Thank you everyone for letting me share this with you today. I really appreciate it. I love talking to this subject. It is the reason I got well. It is the reason why I got here today. So I want to just take a moment again to thank my mentor, Dr. Pete. I wouldn't be here without her today. Yeah, so amazing stuff. Really appreciate each and every one of your listens. So grateful to be able to do this. Thank you. Take care. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.